we've tried to solve the issues of why customers call in. And when we send out tens of thousands of bills, you want to avoid having tens of thousands of phone calls, of course. So really looking at the layout, the data that's on that layout and in that design and how it's shown to the customer really can make a big difference as to those peaks and valleys of the phone calls the call center is going to get.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to DirectWorks. Let's Be Direct podcast number 2. My name is Dan Schotlander, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how invoice layouts can reduce customer service calls. So we're kind of changing gears from our traditional DM talk points and moving over to transactional, another line of business that DirectWorks offers. So this really means bills, statements, notices. They tend to be more financial in nature. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to make these documents more user-friendly for both the biller and the recipient. So today we have special guest, Daryl Chandler. Welcome, Daryl.
Thank you, Dan.
Daryl has a wealth of experience. He's formerly and or currently consulting with major telecom brands and dozens of smaller operators on all things billing systems, and including the all-important bill layout and content, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. So yes, Daryl and I have had the pleasure of collaborating over the last 15 years on a whole bunch of different projects relating to transactional bills, statements, notices, really pulling upon each other's knowledge on how to execute ideas that make bills better and on how to basically make them a more user-friendly touch point. Daryl started out with us about 15 years ago as the operations manager at a cable company, which was later acquired by a major brand. And since then, he's gone out on his own and is now consulting with those same major telecom companies on all things customer information and billing systems. He's a true customer billing systems and bill design layout pro. So yeah, really to jump into it here, obviously there's a lot of things you can do with your bill if you think about it a little bit. And we really got pushed into that because we all receive bills and we actually print and mail bills for customers that do more to confuse or even frustrate rather than inform and simplify for the customer. So I thought we'd start with the story of how we ended up working together on a specific case study, how the rethink of a bill layout was instrumental to making this whole billing process a much more simple exchange between your customers, your internal users, and basically turning it into a very much more enjoyable process overall.
As enjoyable as a bill can be, yes. So Thanks, Dan, for having me. You inviting me on, brings back memories even before we talk about layout of how we used to do our bills and how you solved the issue of having to print them in-house for us. And we'd come in the mornings and the person working overnight maybe left the toner empty or put the paper in backwards or reversed, and we'd have all these issues. So even just having DirectWorks handle the bills in general has been a great step up. But yeah, we've been through several billing system changes, design layouts together. And it was always about making it actually easier for the customer, but also for our own staff. We've tried to solve the issues of why customers call in. And when we send out tens of thousands of bills, you want to avoid having tens of thousands of phone calls, of course. So really looking at the layout, the data that's on that layout and in that design and how it's shown to the customer really can make a big difference as to those peaks and valleys of the phone calls the call center is going to get as we do billing. So that is definitely the main reason we got to work together on this. And we've gone through a few different revisions, and we keep improving, which, as time goes on and as companies offer different products, different services, different ways of billing and different ways customers can pay, it's really made a big difference to modify that layout to be more concise and easier for customers to understand.
Absolutely. Well, maybe what we can do is actually cast back to that time when we first started working together. There was a major project at your end, and it was really speaks to exactly what you're talking about. It was all about this can't continue, the madness has got to stop kind of thing. Maybe you can describe a little bit of, why your customers were calling and how that was really becoming a major issue for you folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first project, as you mentioned, a major project was a billing system change. So obviously lots of things happening there, account numbers changing. And it was for a cable company. So of course there's devices and people are not only just watching cable at this point back in 2005 or six, but getting into internet, we're starting to do phones. So lots of different types of businesses, lines of business or product types on the bill. And the old way, the old system, it kind of spit out like a typewriter did it. Like someone sat there with a cue card and just typed out the transactions, just put them on a big list. And that could be confusing for customers. We would sell maybe a product at one price, but then the system spit it out differently, right? Or was configured differently. So what that first major project involved, changing the billing system and getting better data out of the billing system. So the invoice is only going to look as good as the data you can provide your provider like DirectWorks to create that bill. So that was the first major project we did. And then we took a look at the layout. And that's when we started looking at, all right, what does the billing system provide? We start with that on day one. And then we started looking at why are customers calling? They're calling in because they can't decipher in the way that we're presenting the bill today when they make a change. Why? And we all love, I'm sure, prorates or the term proration. So you call in the middle of the month when it's a subscription service and make a change. We want to charge you the difference for what you've done. Sometimes it's in the company's favor because it's a higher charge, and sometimes it's a downgrade and it's a lower charge. But either way, there's a prorate. So there was a lot of confusion, or it's not easy to tell what those charges were. There's also installation fees, one-time charges, service fees, that kind of stuff that would all be grouped in there, as well as other usage fees. Again, going back maybe 15 years ago, it was somewhat popular to charge for usage after a certain amount when it comes to internet services. And then even today, you've got long distance calls and stuff from phone products. So, having all those usage fees just in a list of transactions with all the monthly fees made it hard for the customer to understand what is my monthly rate that I subscribe to, and what am I paying over and above that because of these other fees, charges, usage that's being applied to my bill. So a lot of confusion over the total. Just a very high level example, we sell something for $150, but the bill's $222. Okay, list of transactions that would drive calls into the call center because someone would want someone to explain all those charges to them. And sometimes you get someone on the phone that also can't explain what those charges are. And I think we've all been in that scenario before. Sure. And it can be frustrating as a customer, of course, to say, well, you provided this bill. What do you mean you can't explain it? Or we need to escalate it, or we need to create a ticket, and we have to go in this loop of waiting for people to call us back. So that was definitely one of the major pain points, was how to understand the bill, why the amount is the way it is. And then also the due dates became a high pain point for the call center. Sometimes people were on pre-authorized payments, but we'd still send them a bill with a due date. Maybe we would send a paper bill out, and even though they auto-remit payments to us already, we give them a business return envelope or reply envelope in the bill. So there's some economies or efficiencies we could get as well from a better layout, and also not confuse the customer with extra data or dates that don't apply to them.
Yeah, why are you sending me an envelope when I pay online? Should I be, have we canceled the pay online thing? What's going on? Let's call and find out. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we've all experienced that with bills, some of those issues, and working on ways to improve our relationship and our brand with our customer in so many other areas. These organizations, ourselves included, we want to have a premier customer experience for our customers, but we're not delivering it when it comes to the bill. And really, when we got to that point and you came in and walked in, it was, it must have been like 2008 or something like that when that major change occurred. And really, it really did come down to how are we grouping things on our bill? How are we summarizing things? It's just not working. We're getting calls about this proration was a huge problem. And then, how do I pay this bill? Those are really the three kind of big, or two or three big problems. If you recall that conversation, it was, one thing I'd like to interject there is that ever since that conversation with every other customer who we engage with, one of the first questions I asked is why are your customers calling in a few days after your billing cycle goes out, right? Let's talk about what the real pain points are there.
Yeah. On that. Yeah. There's always some people just like to talk. So you'll never remove all the calls, but yes, absolutely. It's great to like I said, we get these peaks and valleys in a call center. It's hard to staff when 2 or 3 days out of the month, you're going to get 90% of your calls. Right. So other operators that are larger will do multi-cycle billing and spread that out. But yeah, the small to medium operator, once a month billing makes sense, full calendar months. And it's about staffing for those couple of days of influx of calls.
Right. Or not having to staff them if you have a bill that is simple. And one thing one thing also to mention is that there are statistics that show a bill that's well understood gets paid up to 25% quicker. Because quite often what will happen is a customer doesn't understand something or some aspect of their bill. Well, they're not going to pay it until they understand. So, well, I don't have time to call right now. The bill sits for maybe a week or two, and then they finally get around to doing something with it, right? So, honestly, there's just so many advantages to focusing a little bit on that whole layout. We can talk about marketing on the bill and specific messaging and driving new revenue streams in a whole other podcast. But maybe you can let's drill into a little bit. What did we do and how did we solve these things?
Sure, yeah. When it comes to layout and doing that kind of phase 2, right? We switched systems. We got you a lot more data. So we got more data out of the system that we could actually work with in a raw format instead of just a list of transactions. And so we were able to play around a bit more and actually start doing groupings of transactions. I think that was one of the things that really helped as soon as we started selling multiple products was here's your internet charges, for example, here's your cable TV charges, and here's your phone charges. So even just a simple grouping of those 3 products and maybe other things that came along too. And promotions and adjustments all could be separated. So even right on the front page of the bill, just giving a high level summary of each of those products. Here's what your internet costs today, or this month, and your cable and your phone, and then their taxes and the total. Right on the front, high level summary per product, and people understood what they were paying for.
Yeah,
on
exactly.
the back.
If they wanted to drill in, they can go to the back and look.
Then they would go to the back. And
exactly.
not producing a lot of stereotype maybe of telcos, cable cos is we love to bill. We may not do it right, but we love to bill. So getting an 80-page or 100-page bill maybe isn't uncommon, but we really wanted to solve that issue. We didn't want to send out huge bills. So keeping it concise, not using a font that's too small, but also not having to separate everything into one page per service. Stops people from having to flip through the pages and say, oh, this charge is on page 17 and trying to find it, right? So that back or the page 2 and additional if needed, even doing a 2-column format saved us, saves some money, but it also makes it easier for the customer just to see everything at a glance.
Yeah, you can actually use some white space and like you said, the columns and some color to draw the eye to certain aspects of the bill and emphasize that.
Yeah.
One of the cool things that you mentioned, though, I want to circle back was that summary piece. And not only summarizing what the charges are, but how much is owed within that whole block. So here's your summary. Here's what here's where it all came from at high level. Here's what you paid last month. Here's what's left over or you still owe or overpaid. And here's what you actually owe now, all in one spot. And what's cool about that, though, is that with the growth of e-billing, we can now take that information and put that right on the in the body of the e-bill too. So you can attach the bill that has all of the more extended information. But even if you wanted to, you could put that summary information right on the body of the bill, and at least it's all right easy for the customer to see at a glance, right?
And maybe to your point about bills being paid quicker, when someone sees an amount and they're the type of person that likes to pay a bill as soon as they get it, they're not even opening the bill. I'm not suggesting people shouldn't open the bill because we got lots of nice, cool things in the bill too that we want them to see and maybe upgrade. But hey, the fact that they see an amount and a due date and they make a payment is a benefit to everyone when that happens.
Right. It's golden.
So thanks for bringing that up too. Like that summary on the front, balance forward, the summary, and then the total. Something else we added underneath that, right under that summary, is account specific details as far as their due date based on, are they an auto pay customer? Are we going to do they have a pre-authorized credit card or checking account that we're going to take a payment from? Or are they actually in arrears? So we use the very next section under that summary and that total due to explain, hey, we're going to take the payment on this date, or you need to pay us by this date, or by the way, you're overdue and this is your due date. But we changed colors and we use different font colors and sizes to highlight that, to make it really obvious and draw their eye to anything very specific we want to highlight to them that's really important as far as payment goes, especially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do what do I
Yeah.
pay and when?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe if I can just go back to, so we have the summary on the front, what we did on the back to help with the understanding. We talked about prorates a little bit ago. People upgrade, they downgrade, they want that flexibility. I want this channel or I want a different speed. And it's always, it tends to be a billing confusion or maybe nightmare. I hate to use that word, but so one thing we improved upon was that separate from the monthly amounts, if you were to change your internet speed, for example, we kept it in the internet section or that grouping, but we highlighted it first saying, here's the changes you made since your last bill. And we used icons and we used color to show here's what you added and here's what you removed. And we used clear dates to show what date you made that change on. And that's why you're seeing a credit for the old service and a charge for the new service. That gets subtotaled. And then the very next section, we're showing the monthly charges again. So now they can clearly see, well, here's my normal monthly amount for this new service or the changes I've made. And up above that, they can see the credits and charges and prorates that affect their total for this bill. So I think that was very helpful in reducing call volume, is splitting out any changes they make versus what their normal monthly is going forward.
Absolutely. And the beauty of that is that with today's technology and the use of color is much more easily done than it ever was in the past. It's more cost effective. It's not like if you go to black, you're going to save 400% of the cost of going to color for this variable information. There are technologies, inkjet technologies specifically that address this perfectly and are actually environmentally a lot cooler than using black toner, right?
Right.
Where you're generating a lot less heat and energy
to
do that. But so yeah, that's awesome. And what else there was other...
If we go back, we were talking a little bit about usage charges. So again, it's kind of gone away, which is great for the consumer. We don't really charge a lot of internet overages these days. It's often an unlimited plan or a speed throttle plan. But phone is a good example of maybe international calling is always going to be chargeable, or 411 and those types of services. So having those on the bill before, just as another transaction as part of the grand total, just inflated that bill. It made it look like every month I'm going to be spending this much, when that really wasn't the case. Yeah, so again, keeping to those groupings on the back or in the subsequent pages that we talked about. We've got our prorates, we've got our monthly charges, then we've got our one-time usage. Again, just separated in that grouping. It shows that this is one time for this specific month. It's added to your total, but it's just completely separate from the monthly charges. Really, I think, and I've said it maybe 12 times now, but I was really keen on having a monthly charge shown that shows them what their normal monthly rate is on all these groupings. Everything else is above and below as a one-time thing for this particular bill. So separating out long distance, pay-per-view, movie purchases, VOD, that kind of stuff, video on demand.
Sure. I mean, it could be, and it could be in any industry. I think that the principles are the same. You want to be respectful to your customer. And in some regards, you could almost say that the way the bills were being presented in the case of when we originally endeavored to work on your project, it was absolutely a disrespectful bill. It was you could literally not even pick up a calculator and figure out exactly what was happening. And so obviously that was a pain point for the customer service department as well as the customers.
Right. Yeah, good point. As making it easier for the customer ideally makes it easier for your own staff as well. When they have to answer the call and explain the bill. And another great part of what we do with this new layout and this new bill is we give the exact bill to the customer service agents that need to answer the questions from the customers. So back into the billing system, they can pull up the exact bill the customer's looking at. And they're not just looking at a list of transactions. They're seeing exactly all the improvements we've just been talking about. So that makes it easier to answer.
Yeah, that's not even a layout thing, but it's just a common sense workflow, right? I mean, you got to make sure that you're looking at the same thing that your customer is seeing.
Yeah,
and it's
we've all had those calls,
right?
That's
not true.
Yeah, we've all had those calls. We call in somewhere and they have no idea what we're looking at. We're like, well, on page 7 it says this, and the person doesn't know what you're talking about at page 7,
exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So really, I guess what we did, maybe not knowingly back then, is we really produced a best practices kind of approach, and involving a little bit of consulting back and forth, asking the right questions of your customer service, who's calling, why are they calling. We went ahead and I think if I'm hearing you correctly, the biggest 2 or 3 items that we had to check off that list to make this a much better process was grouping things together and summarizing them on the front of the bill. Get that high level, whether it's categories of product types or service types. Put those all together, then summarize exactly how to pay, when to pay, very clear. Get that on the front. Use some white space. As I said, we can talk about some other messaging on the bill. Messaging is a whole other, like I said, it's a whole other conversation. But relating to the layout, at least using appropriate colors to draw the eye. Knowing when the due date is going to be is huge for these situations, especially if you've got new customers and it's a subscription type, right? That's where it starts to become a little more confusing for them. And then basically with the payment stub, we did quite a bit with that, where typically a bill will have either at the top or at the bottom will have a payment stub, and we actually made the data on that variable and basically looked at how they pay and what we know about how they pay, and then made sure the messaging on that itself is reflective of their typical payment type, right?
Yeah, great example. Someone has a credit balance. Instead of giving a remit slip that's asking how much are they enclosing, we actually say, do not, no payment required, or something very easy for someone to understand. Oh, I don't have to send a payment. You don't have to tell me twice, right? I'm not sending a payment. Right. There's all sorts of components of the bill that are dynamic, that are looking at things on the customer, even from, are they paper or email? Right. So if we're sending a paper bill, we're trying to prompt them to sign up for email billing. And if they're not on auto payments, the back of that remit has a pre-authorization form that they can sign up for those payments. So if they're sending it back anyway with their payment, maybe they'll sign up for pre-authorized payments. So
right, like a gentle nudge, right?
Yeah, and it's on every bill, so they don't have to call and ask for the form.
Yeah,
they don't have to go online if maybe they happen to not have internet service where they are at the time, or they don't want to use their phone plan. It's on the bill. So lots of different things there that have improved the need to contact the company or the customer service department for some things.
Right, and I think like we were saying, it just comes down to, if you were the customer and you wanted to understand this bill as well as the billing person that you're talking to, the billing person at the other end, what would you do, right? What would you do to clarify and compartmentalize and emphasize those key areas? And that'll be different from customer to customer and coming out of different CISs. How you use that, but I think the principles are all the same at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's about making it a very clear, concise process for the customer.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to you, especially for subscription services, you sell a product at a certain price, and anytime it's not exactly that price, you want very clear information as to why it's that way. Why is it higher? Why is it lower? And avoid the phone call with a question. Just put it comes down to your data as well. Layouts, of course, what we're talking about, and very important. But the layout can only handle what data you send into that layout for it to present, right? Providing that data and the way that we've separated it from, again, I think the key is the monthly services has really helped with call center operations.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there are some really cool things that you can do to emphasize those changes, adds and deletions using color and icons that, again, draw that eye in and just make clarity a priority on your bill, right? Great. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time, Daryl. It's been a pleasure working with you, and thank you for coming in. And thanks to everybody for taking a few minutes to have a listen to how Invoice layouts can reduce customer service calls. This is the Let's Be Direct podcast number 2. My name's Dan Schottlander. Have a great day, and we will be in touch. Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you.